I like the idea of running it to a hearing aid because sometimes I have this
Yeah,
mic and then sometimes I get the feedback back on the audio. So I have to think about maybe doing
right.
it through a hearing aid
Yeah,
so that that's a
yeah,
brilliant idea.
yeah, yeah. It took me the better part of 6 months to figure out how to connect the hearing aid to it. But I called the audiologist that prescribed them, or that filled the prescription, I guess. And she's like, here, click here, click here, click here, click here, boom, boom, boom. I was like, oh, that was genius. And then I've been working on this for months. She's like, why didn't you call me? I said, oh, yeah, that would have been the smart thing to do, huh?
I love that idea because, most people wear the headphones so that,
Right.
but that's not very nice. And just a hearing aid would be far better. If it's a,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
it's the earphones, it just looks so contrived. It doesn't look
Right,
like what it really is, which is,
right, exactly.
yeah, I
I
am
agree.
so happy to meet you. I've read your
Yeah, it's like
blogs
face to face.
yeah, for a long time. I've been following your blogs and you just are consistently, I don't know where you get the vocabulary, how you put sentences together. I don't know how, and
Okay.
I don't know how you just churn out as much as you churn out. But I've been asked many times, can we interview you or can we tell your story or will you tell your story? And I thought, no, no, nope, nope. And then I'm following you and I'm listening to you and you really get the Gogi thing. You get it. So I thought, you know what? I will tell my story to JT because I bet you anything that he's going to be able to put the words in the way that I would want to read them. So
Okay.
I am so grateful that you were willing to kind of ask me questions
Yeah.
and I printed them out. My gosh, you were so organized. Section one, my life before Gogi. Section two, the birth of Gogi. It is just section three, the Gogi life tools. Oh my gosh. I mean, we could be here for days with all these
Oh, I
sections
know.
that you've done, but we'll get through as many of them as possible.
Okay.
And I'm just very, very excited about our time together.
Me too. I'm glad to meet you. We've talked for over a year now. I looked it up. I had to go back dig through my emails of our first conversations and catch a fire and stuff. And I was like, we've been at this for a year and we've never met. It's so weird.
Are you in New York?
I am in Iowa.
In Iowa. Well, chances
Yes.
are we aren't going to be meeting because I don't have anything in Iowa yet. Hopefully, we'll have
But
Goki in Iowa.
I just say we're actually going to talk about that because as a result of a blog that I wrote about Gogi, the director of the Department of Corrections reached out to me last week
Oh,
and said,
wow.
would you consider coming to Des Moines and talking to me about Gogi? Just tell me about it. I will reach out to the creator, but I want to talk to you and see if you're really as passionate about it as it sounds in writing. And I said, I
See,
am,
and
probably
that's
more so, because
why,
I hold back. I
yeah,
was like, wow.
that's why I'm willing to answer these questions because you get it. You totally,
Yeah.
completely get it. And for that, I'm very, very grateful. So, what I
Well,
thought
thank you.
was, somebody said, well, we need something written down about you, coach. And I thought, ugh, those little bios are so annoying.
Yeah.
And besides, most of our population is watching this on a tablet or on YouTube. So why not put a face to it? We can always translate it down into words, but why not have a conversation that we could share with 400 prisons and jails and hundreds of
Right,
thousands of
exactly.
incarcerated people doing Gogi? So
I
that's
love
why
that.
I asked you. And so I'm
Yay.
here and I'm just going to answer any question that you ask of me.
Okay. Okay. Well, are you ready? Oh.
For you, yes. For others,
All
maybe
right.
not so.
Maybe not so much. All right. I appreciate that. Thank you. First, before Goyi existed, who was Mara Lee? Who was that
um,
person?
I could define myself as uh, lifelong depression, a never feeling heard, feeling special, but not in a good way,
Okay.
feeling um, like I didn't really want to be on this earth. By the time I kind of transitioned to the world of Gogi, I was a single mother, didn't know why I had been left on Christmas Eve, didn't know why my family had no concept of my suffering. It was really bad. I'll tell you one quick story. As a young child, I would go to school and come home, and I would go to school and I was extremely likable. I had a lot of friends, very socially active, and I would come home and go into my room, close my door, and go into my closet, curl up in a ball, and cry.
Oh,
The world seemed fake to me. Nothing seemed real. And it wasn't until that first prison tour that something looked like how I felt.
that's what had to not be such a great feeling at all. To walk into a
No.
prison and say, "Oh, here it is, I'm home," kind of thing.
Well,
That aha moment.
it was an epiphany. It was
Wow.
I was way into my 40s. Yeah, I was 40s at the time, and we took it. I went back to school, single motherhood. I thought I've got to
Mhm.
figure out something. So I went back to school for psychology. We took a tour of a prison. And the moment that big door, and anybody who's sitting in an 8 foot cell and a 2 inch mattress will know the sound the very first time that door slams behind you, the finality, the containment, the oppression from that clang, it
Yeah.
reverberated through my body. I was the last one next to the door. And when I looked up and saw the yard, it was like I had an epiphany. The prison looked like how I felt. And what the biggest thing that came over me was, you're home. And then I thought, that's really messed up. That's
Right.
really messed up.
Right.
But
That's
it was a
not some.
it was a lightning bolt of, you're home. It looked like how
Right.
I felt. And that's when the Gogi journey began.
Wow. Well, first, I'm sorry that felt like home because you're right. That door, as you put it, clanging shut behind you, it rattles you to the bones the first time. It just you feel it to your bones. It's like you realize it's really final. You're not turning around to go back to McDonald's, you
Right.
know?
Right.
So, all right. So, have you always felt drawn to helping people heal or getting systems in place to help people heal? Has that always been part of you? And you just identified it when you went into prison the first time?
Absolutely not. I
Okay.
I helped little animals that were injured. So we lived near a desert. So if there was a lizard that had its tail missing, or a rabbit that got pinched, I remember a little rabbit got his hind leg hurt. I always had a compassion for animals, but people, not so much. I perceive them to be more like the enemy. Not that I had a terrible childhood. I didn't experience any abuse except maybe just being ignored, which is, in and of itself is a certain level of abuse. I didn't want
Yeah.
to help anybody because I was helpless. I couldn't help anyone because I was hopeless. There was nothing in me that could make the world a better place for anybody because my world sucked. It wasn't until way into the Gogi journey when I was so desperate. I was Desperation led me to ask questions of the prisoners. And that's when I thought, they have the answers. They're helping me. And then when I started regurgitating some of the psychology jargon back to them when I would meet with them every week, it wasn't until then that I thought, "Oh, I can help them. I can help them. Wow, they're helping me. And this feels good for everybody. Maybe service sets us free." And that's how the journey began.
That's incredible. Well, I'm glad you started asking questions and have gotten Gogi to where it's at today, which we'll get to a little further down the line here. What were some of the early beliefs? You kind of touched on them just now when you answered that question. What were some of the early beliefs that you had about change and whether or not people could genuinely change?
Oh, I knew change was impossible. No, I absolutely, from day one out of the womb until I walked through that prison door and the door slammed, absolutely change was never possible. Cards were dealt against me. I was a black sheep that nobody wanted to listen to, that had nothing to say, that was my prison sentence was profound, and no one could tell me anything different, period. End of story, full stop.
Right. That's harsh. Harsh, harsh, harsh. And what do you think now about change?
It can happen in a split second. It can happen with one silly Gogi life tool. It can happen with one conversation. It can happen when one individual reaches out and says, I see something special in you. It can happen just in a dream. It can happen by putting on a new pair of shoes. Change is so easy because we control it. We control every aspect of the change process. It is all within us. There is nothing that is needed outside of us. We could sit in an 8-foot cell for the rest of our life and we could still feel a sense of freedom that most people on the outside don't feel.
Okay. That's that's somewhat profound because people, I think in general, people think that you're kind of dealt the deal, the cards you're dealt in the beginning, and you're stuck with them. They don't understand you can shuffle them back in the deck and get some new cards out with some work. No, I think that's like I said, that borders on profound to me that you came to that realization walking into the prison,
Well,
and that's amazing.
people always said, oh, he has a calling. This is his calling. This is an epiphany. And yeah, right.
Yeah,
Epiphany, this, calling that. It's all BS. It's to try to get
yeah.
some leverage and some power. But I'm telling you, JT, when I walked through that prison, that final door at Terminal Island Federal Prison in San Pedro, California, when I walked through that final door and it slammed behind me, and the reverberation, it was like a lightning bolt. Every cell of my body resonated with familiarity. Every cell of my body said, You're home. Every cell of my body. And I've never felt it again. But I felt it then, and I know what it feels like. It was a reverberation of truth. And when we find a passion, when we find something that we, oh, wow, I love that, we feel that sensation of knowing. It's a knowing that this is a little stream that if I enter that stream and I sit on the little rubber tube, I might have a fun ride. And so that was that moment that I decided to hop on that inner tube on that little lazy river.
Nice. I'm going to ask you to reflect back to earlier in your life. Go back to about 24, 25 years old. If you could sit down next to younger you and say, hey, I know what the future holds, what would you tell yourself about
What
your
I
future?
needed to hear is, You are heard. I hear you. I hear you. I hear you.
Okay.
And then I hear you again. Because so many of us don't feel heard. But we talk and people say they
Mhm.
listen, but are you truly heard? Do you feel heard? Do you feel seen for who you are? I didn't know that. I was grasping for, well, what if I did this? And what if I then maybe I could feel like I belong here. All I needed to hear was that I hear you. I see you. You matter. You are important.
Why were those things so important to be seen, to be heard, to know that you were important to somebody other than you? And at that point, I'm guessing you weren't too important to you. Just talking about the depression you mentioned before. Why were those things so vital to you in your heart?
Well, I think we choose our life paths, and I think finding my voice for others who are not heard was just a little bit of my destiny. By being denied a sense of being heard, I realized how important it is. I
Mhm.
realized that every voice matters and that the root of all of it is a sense of feeling loved and appreciated and acknowledged. And I didn't feel that. Not that I didn't have a loving family. They loved in their own way, but it wasn't the way I needed. I needed eye contact. I needed to be still. I needed to have a dinner with one of my parents, just me and that person, rather than the hectic, chaotic nature I grew up. It was important to connect. That's why I like Zoom meetings that we can record rather than big speeches because I feel like I can look you in the eyes and you and I connect. And so many of the incarcerated, well, so many humans don't feel heard. They don't even know what it's like to be heard. But once you get a taste of it, that it's, I want more of that. I want more of that.
That makes perfect sense to me. Um, when you went into the person or into the prison, excuse me, the very first time, and you knew you had a purpose to serve, not just to go hang out, not to question them for a psychology class, but to go in with that purpose that you felt in the core of your being, in your soul. What was the difference between then and when you walked in there to ask questions for a psych class?
Very, very interesting. Psych class is let's have a tour of a prison. You can see the population that you might end up working with should you choose to go on with your education. It was a master's degree. So the tour was just this is what a prison looks like, and this is what my professor did as a drug treatment counselor. That was just me raising my hand because the time slot of the prison fit between dropping my daughter off at daycare and picking her up. And I think we were given 100 extra points. So it was a lark. It was just kind of like, okay, where is Terminal Island? That sounds terrible. Prison, all of that was just a lark. When I got there and it looked like how I felt, that's when the desperation turned into absolute obsession with finding the answer. I had to stay in prison. I had to stay there because I knew they had the key. I knew that in the confines of that, in the confines of that block square building with these housing units, with the razor wire, with the brick, with the guard towers, with the guards, with the doors. I knew I was going to find my freedom. I just knew it. I knew it. So it turned from my desperation was heightened. And then this drive and absolute commitment. I've got to stay inside this place and figure freedom out.
Right? Excellent. You mentioned you had during that first visit, you said hi to some inmates. Um, and I always go back and forth, and I should have asked this earlier. Do you prefer inmate, incarcerated person? What vernacular do you use when you're talking about the guys that you work with?
Well, here's an interesting thing. When somebody has, let's say, killed somebody,
Mhm.
and by the way, most offenses are done when somebody is alcohol or drug related. So most crimes are committed when people are not in their right mind. They are in some way medicated, self-medicated, or intoxicated. I, just as an aside, I believe that if everybody was sober, our prisons would be emptied. But that's my own my own approach to if we want to empty prisons out, just get everybody sober and would be good.
Good to
So if
know.
a man, a gang member, has killed a their girlfriend's side thing,
Hmm.
there is a part of that person that feels remorse, that feels that they know they did something wrong. And working through that rehabilitation, forgiveness, all redemption, all of that is a long process. To deny that process is to deny them the full aspect of healing. So when you say justice impacted person, well, so is a guard, so is the psychologist, so am I as a volunteer. But if a man has taken the life of somebody else or under a DUI, if three people were killed, if I did that to call me justice impacted, actually, I was impacted by my alcohol. I was impacted by my gang affiliation. I was impacted by being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's denying that person the possibility of full redemption and full healing. A
That
prisoner can be a prisoner of their own mind, a prisoner of alcohol. A prisoner is a label that allows you to look within for the freedom. So they're now the buzzword is, oh, it's a justice impacted person. Okay, but are they an addict? Are they a gang member? Were they high? Were they, it's for me, and there's many other opinions. Justice impacted is a more fair title, but it does not allow the person to address the root cause of why they're in there in the first place. So, Gogi prisoners are Gogi students. They are students. The Gogi
Okay.
inmates, they are students. The Gogi prisoners, they're students. The Gogi injustice impacted people, they're
That's
students. I remember
perfect.
at the Los Angeles County Jail, I was asked to create a Gogi module. And they said, well, we want you to do this module. We've read your Gogi books. We like the idea. We need something. And I said, okay, I'll do it on several conditions. And they said, what? I said, you don't call them inmates, you call them students. And they said, you can call them whatever you want. They're inmates to us. Call them students. I said, okay, they're students. Call the pod a campus. You can't call it a pod. It's not a module, it's a campus. We are going to be full immersion learning Gogi, and we are students, and this is Gogi campus, and they're going to graduate. And I want a graduation. Grady Macknick, who was then the sergeant of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and Roel Garcia, who was at that time a deputy, who's now a commander, and they're still running Gogi, by the way, there. They agreed that under those conditions, they would let it happen. That when you gave somebody else, you didn't take away the inmate title because they were there for a reason, but you gave them something else that they could earn, something else that they could create, something else that was theirs. They were, in this case, a Gogi girl. They were a Gogi student in a Gogi campus. Yes, they were an inmate. They might have been going to prison, probably were going to lose their children, had bad addiction they were dealing with, but they were a Gogi student at a Gogi campus and they were going to create that environment.
That rocks. I love that. When you reflect on some of those early conversations, is there one particular conversation that really has clung with you or stuck with you since that day?
Oh, GT, it's been 25 years of those conversations. Every one of the
Okay.
tools, and there are a dozen of them, every one of them was brought to Gogi by a prisoner, a Gogi student who was in prison. Every single tool, from Boss of My Brain to Ultimate Freedom, every single one. And every single one, I remember the face of the individual who actually helped create that tool. I remember the setting. I remember everything about it. So it's been 25 years of the most profound conversations and illuminations. And through the process of being of service, I found my own freedom, which, and then I thought, oh, I'll go in, I'll fix the prison system a little bit. I'll be out in a couple of years. This is easy. 25 years later, I'm going strong. I'm still at it. You can't get me out of prison. I'm LWOP, life without
Life without.
possibility.
I love that. I love that. Um, the phrase "getting out by going in" is kind of a paradox because in order, to get freedom, you have to get locked up. In this case, what did it mean to you then when you came up with that versus what does it mean now? Does
Oh,
it still have
interesting.
the same powerful
Yeah,
impact?
interesting. I was sitting at Terminal Island on the floor in the chapel slash basketball court slash everything else. And one of
Yes.
the guys said, damn, coach, what you're telling me is to get out of prison, I gotta go inside. And then the guy next to him said, yeah, getting out by going in. And then the guy across the way said, ha, Gogi. And that's how we got our name.
Oh wow, wow. That, I should have asked that long ago. That's a great story, actually. Was there ever a point early on where it got so frustrating or so overwhelming or so heavy on you, hearing some of the stories and dealing with people every day, that you almost threw in the towel and said, nah, I can't do this anymore, or no, this was a bad idea. Let me go back and reinvent the wheel. What kept you going in those early days? Because it had to be challenging.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. There wasn't a day in the 25-year journey where anyone in my family or my friends thought it was a good idea. I sacrificed, I don't know, everything, everything. Because when you immerse yourself so fully in that world, it's at the exclusion of everything else. The only thing that mattered to me was my daughter, making certain I was there for her in a way that I had not been experienced, and my education and my service. So that was my that was my dilemma, and it was terrible. In 2002 there was no programming. 2025 there's lots of programming, but I had to wear steel-toed boots when I went into the prison, and a gunny sack. When I first went into Pelican Bay State Prison, and CCI level 4 prisons, I had to have a spit mask and a stab vest, and it was a very different environment that scared everyone but me. I was just so desperate for freedom that I would do anything. I would be on a yard with a riot that broke out. That happened more than once, simply because I was either going to find myself happy on earth, or I didn't want to be here, and I was not going to stop until I did. So I remember one moment when I had come into the jail setting, and there was a turn of administration, and there was this woman that didn't like me at all. She was now in charge of programming at the jail. I walked into the clearance, and they were doing shift change for the guards. I walked to start walking down the long hall, and the whole line of guards turned their back on
Wow.
me. Here I am entering a high security jail setting, and they turn their back as if to say, "You're on your own, lady. If something goes down, we aren't going to be there for you. We don't want you here. We don't need you here." Now, things have changed. Now, our biggest advocates, I have officers, sergeants, wardens emailing me all the time, counselors saying, "Gogi's the best thing. Thank you for all the free material." But way back then, officers turned their back, and I thought, I'm screwed. If, if
Hey,
something happens, they're
wow.
going to let me be killed and say, "Oh, poor lady, wrong place, wrong time." There were so many instances where um, it really took a lot to hang in there, JT. It
Yeah.
really
Okay.
took a lot.
That had to be that not only daunting and frustrating, but almost overwhelming and make you question whether or not do I want to go back tomorrow or next week? I mean, seriously, wow. You mentioned that there's multiple Gogi tools. What single one of them speaks to you personally the loudest when you go through your list that you and your um, individuals have come up with?
Well, the final tool is ultimate freedom. Being free is up to me. Service sets me free. So every day I wake up, how can I personally make the world a better place? Is it by making sure my bed is clean, my clothes are clean? Is it by making a cup of coffee for someone in the office and just surprising them? Is it placing a phone call? I really, really try my best to get out of my own head and my own troubles, my own worries, and I try to be of service every day. With that mindset, there's no depression, there's no anxiety, because I'm just waking up. How can I make the world a better place? Not on a big scale like, "Oh, let me call Oprah." No, it's
Right.
the smaller moment by moment little things we do with individuals within 3 feet of where we are. That's where we make the profound service agreement that sets us free. It's not big stuff. It's not founding a nonprofit. It's not making millions of dollars so you can give it to some philanthropic effort. It's how do you react when you pick up the phone? When somebody irritates you, how do you treat them? When you're on with customer service, how do you respond to that person who's getting paid next to nothing and is frustrated? The last thing they want to be is on a customer service line. Do they really need you to be impatient? Or might it be of service to say, "I hope you have a good day. Thank you so much for helping me." So, being aware of the positive impact that you can have on every little thing around you, that's where my freedom is. And that's why today and every day I utilize all the tools, but ultimate freedom is the driver.
I love that. It reminds me of my late grandfather. He said, in life, your mission is two things a day. Make one person smile that's not smiling when you cross paths with them, and change one thing in the world that's going to make it better for your children and me at the same time.
See, that's
And
he was Gogi before there was Gogi. That's
right,
that's why I
exactly.
want this conversation with you because
Yes,
you get it, JT. You get it.
yeah. And every day we would come home from school. He's like, okay, who did you make smile? And what did you change? Have you changed anything yet? You got until the sun goes down, and by sundown you better tell him something you changed, or you were in trouble. He wasn't as nice as you are about
But I think he should get an
it.
honorary Gogi coach badge because
Yeah,
that
I
is
think
exactly
so.
what we do.
Yes. Um, when we talk about Gogi and you mentioned graduations and stuff, um, what defines mastery of Gogi? Is it what you're doing, how you're doing it? Is it something more spiritual? Is it something very personal, or is it something very public?
Well, a couple of things. I think the magic, if you could say it's not really magic, but the simplicity of Gogi is what makes it so universal. There was not one type of person that contributed to the tools. There was not one type of religion or organization that contributed to all the aspects of the culture. Gogi is universal. We have a calendar. We all study on a calendar, but we do things very differently. Like how the state of Oregon runs their Gogi is very different than California. And in Missouri, they run it differently there. So it's really what is possible. What is possible? And then you get a staff member and one of our Gogi students collaborating and they create their own Gogi environment. So there's a lot of flexibility. The only thing that we want is to share these simple tools for positive decision making. And if you choose to study in a meeting format, we've got that. If you choose to study in a recovery format, we've got that. If you choose to study any one of our courses, we have those. But it's really about making these simple tools available to anybody. And people use them anyway. There's probably hundreds of thousands of people studying Gogi that I don't even know about. They're just doing their own thing. They got the book somewhere. They have a little circle group. They're doing their Gogi. I hear that all the time.
I love that. That's great. You mentioned you received over 100,000 letters from people who have participated in Gogi over the years. First, that's overwhelming to me. I can't imagine 100,000 letters from any group of people, honestly. How does the volume of truth that are shared in those letters impact you as a person? Knowing what you're doing and seeing that I'm assuming on a daily basis, you're getting mail if you have that many over the years.
So we get our first letter that says, I want Gogi. I saw it on my tablet. My family saw it on YouTube. My family saw it on Facebook. I want Gogi. We send them back an assignment called the My Life Story assignment. They have to write 15 pages about their life, reflecting. That is what I've received over 100,000 of, is 100,000 My Life Stories where individuals who are incarcerated or detained have written about their life journey. And I've saved every single one of them. I have a big container and it's filled with archive boxes of the stories of my students. And I feel like in a way I'm like a Gogi mother and all of their homework is on the refrigerator. Many of them, many of them didn't have mothers that had magnets for the refrigerator. Some of them didn't have
Right.
refrigerators, but I've kept every single My Life story. So I have the story of over 100,000 prisoners as they go through the journey of understanding themselves and how can they contribute positively and how can they make the world a better place and who are they? And most of them say that that 15-page assignment, while very daunting, actually illuminated so much in their own lives.
Do you remember the first letter you got?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Will you share without any breach of
Sure,
confidentiality or
sure.
anything? What was in that first letter that motivated you to keep going to accumulate 100,000 of them?
Yeah, so the Terminal Island project was growing, but we started with 6 or 8 prisoners who became
Okay.
students, and then it grew to 16, then 32. Then pretty soon the entire gym was filled and officers lined the walls, and there would be 100 or more prisoners slash students in the room. But prisoners get transferred. I didn't know that, especially at the feds. Prisoners gets transferred. So I'd have people transferring and they'd say, "Well, I can't lose my Gogi. I gotta remain connected." Well, I'm not gonna have them write me letters at my house. So I got a
Right.
PO box I got a PO box in 2006. And we still have the same PO box, by the way. And I bought the biggest one available because I knew we were going to get a lot of letters. And I would go every week and look at the box and it was empty, empty. I thought maybe I'm wrong. I don't think I'm wrong, but maybe I'm wrong. I remember the first time I went to the mailbox and I turned the key, opened it, and there was one lone letter in the bottom of the
Hey,
box. And it was from one of my students named Danny Allen. And Danny Allen wrote me a letter. I remember I lifted the letter and I started to cry. And I turned around and I slid down and sat down next to the PO box and opened the letter. And he wanted Gogi.
how did that make you feel at that moment?
Well, how it makes me feel now is beautiful. It's
Excellent.
beautiful.
Excellent. After reading these hundreds and thousands of letters, um, some of them have to be really heavy and heartbreaking. Others make you feel wonderful, and make you realize how fortunate some of the people that you work with have been in life, and maybe question how they ended up where they're at in your universe. How does that make you feel as a person?
Well, most of them, I wouldn't trade my horror for theirs.
No,
It reduced my perspective from I had a bad childhood and I wasn't heard or listened to. It reduced it down to nothing. The horror that a lot of people experience in their life, physical horrors, sexual horrors, drug horror, abandonment horror, the it's incredible any of us lived to 13.
right, right.
It
True
is,
story.
it's truly amazing. Any of us live.
And
So a majority of them, I would say 90% of them are horrific, horrific
okay,
stories. And if you were to really look at that human being, it is no wonder they ended up on drugs. I think it's
right.
80% of the women in jails and prisons have been sexually molested before they were 13. Well, of course they're going to use drugs. And once you use drugs, of course you're going to sell your body or steal something. Of course. It's of course.
Right. And how do you feel about the fact that complete strangers are trusting you with with their entire lives? I mean, literally, you just mentioned being sexually assaulted or abused before the age of like, can't, blah, blah, got tongue tied there. Before the age of 13, they'd been sexually abused, maybe physically abused as well. And the same thing, sometimes I think people don't understand that it happens to men as well as to women. It's not just a
A
woman who's
lot.
sexually assaulted,
A
right?
lot.
And realizing that these men and women are trusting you with their deepest, darkest secrets in many cases. How does it make you feel that you're
I'm
that trusted?
trustworthy. I'm trust
Right.
I'm trustworthy.
Okay.
They can trust me. They can trust me
Yeah.
because what I see in each of them is far greater than the trauma that they experience. What I see in them is a possible solution for the troubles we have in our world. What I see in them is their potential. I refuse to see anything else. So
Love that.
they can trust me.
Okay. We're kind of going to shift gears a little bit now, and we're going to talk about your new podcast briefly.
Yes, I'm so
You, I,
excited.
I am too. Believe me, I am too. So tell me about the podcast Getting Out by Going In with Love Coach. Why now? Why this format? Why? Just why? All the whys about that new
A couple
podcast that's
things.
coming.
Maybe I feel safe now. I felt really
Okay.
safe in the prisons because the prisoners, there's a different code in a prison. You look somebody in the eye and your word is your bond and there's a different code in prisons. And my students, the prisoners, could trust me. They knew they could trust me and I could trust them. But out here, it's a different
Not so
game.
much.
It's
I
a
would say
different
not so
game.
much.
People
Right.
lie, they cheat, they steal, they're too busy. Oh yes, I said I would do that. I can't. There's people are not people of their word. At least that's what I'm experiencing. Why now? Because enough of my students have gotten out that I've got a good group of warriors.
Yeah. Um, let's see. what is the experience of speaking the words from the letters out loud and sharing those with other individuals?
Yeah, well, part of the podcast is going to be reading the letters from students. I get a lot of letters, Dear Coach Taylor. Some of them say, Dear Gogi, I want to do the free courses, but some are, Dear Coach Taylor, let me share the story of how Gogi's changed my life. Those are the letters that I'll be reading on the podcast and commenting on how I responded to this individual or how I would want to respond. Because if we can share this podcast, maybe a mother will understand her son a little better, or a father will understand his daughter a little better. If you have a loved one who's incarcerated or has an addiction, maybe just reading these letters of these amazing human beings who have caused so much harm, but who have had harm caused to them, if they are putting the pieces together, I believe that their words can help us put the pieces together in our own life. I think we have a lot to learn from the journey of getting out of prison by going in.
That that I think you're dead on with that, actually. Thinking about reflecting on my own experiences in life. You're right. I think that's true, and I think we overlook that. The sign off with love, coach. You send all this love out into the world. What impact do you think that has when somebody sees, like I have a proof copy of a book um, from you from
Yeah.
long ago. This book is there's stuff in here I'll show you. I have stuff underlined in it and things. It's like I've actually read the books and stuff. When you sign off with love, coach, that sends all of this out into the world to people who may never have experienced that kind of love and respect. How does that make you feel when you reflect on it, that you're putting all of you out into the world with all of us?
I I really think that it was more selfish than that. I never felt loved. I never felt I don't know. I never felt loved. So by giving it away, I'm getting it. The love that I give to all my students or anybody is really it comes back to me. I feel so loved. Why? Because everything I give is with love. Coach, with love. Give it away, give it away, give it away, give it away. Feel it, feel it, feel it. I
Okay.
just experience that the more I'm able to gift the feeling seen and heard to other people, the more I feel seen and heard, the more love I feel.
Okay. Um, Reflecting on the podcast again, it's brand new, just getting up and going. Who do you most have hope will be listening to it?
My students, of course, that there's tablets in a lot of prisons now, not all of them, but on the tablets. And we have partnered with an organization called Edovo, and they put materials on tablets in more than 400 prisons and jails. So the motivation of the podcast is I can reach these students without having to drive drive for hundreds of miles and stay in little tiny towns with terrible hotels and no restaurants. And I got to tell you, I it's been a journey. It's been pretty
Wow.
horrific. But if I can reach
Yeah.
them by on their tablets, then I'll be more than happy to share everything that I've
Right.
experienced in 25 years.
Okay. Do you consider your podcast a message to the world or to your former students? And I shouldn't call them former students because Gogi is a lifelong commitment. You know, it's like to your students. Is this for them? Is it for everybody to be introduced to Gogi and hopefully get it into additional prisons to help even more individuals?
JT, I'm not sure how ready people are to be still and actually listen. Our world is very divisive. It's very consumer oriented. It's vindictive and mean in many cases. There is an undercurrent of a need for gentleness. So I am certain that if somebody needs something gentle and kind, they will stumble upon the podcast And I just hope, beyond all hope, that it touches their heart in a way that mine was touched. um, I hope that everybody can feel the level of freedom that I am now feeling, or that my students, the prisoners, feel. I wish that for the world, but to even have the possibility of that, you have to be still enough. You have to learn belly breathing and boss in my brain and 5 second light switch. You have to be able to shift your perception, positive thoughts, positive words, positive actions. You have to be able to move beyond the past, let go, forgive, claim responsibility, and you have to be able to create something different. Reality check, ultimate freedom, and what if. So if somebody is so desperate like I was, they might find this podcast interesting, but most people are too busy and they rather watch some drama, they rather watch some reality show than really sit with themselves long enough and have a good cry and say, life must be more than all the anger and hatred. Life must be more than me being miserable. Life must be more than scrolling. There must be something more. I hope that those individuals tune in and listen, and I hope they're inspired. And if they're not, I hope they don't badmouth it and turn somebody else away. Because our intention, the prisoners and me, our intention is good and it's clear and it's right and it's inclusive and it's for everybody and it's every human being can get out of prison by going in for the answers. And that's our message.
Okay. And I just want to, I guess, a point of clarification. Um, Getting out by going in. A lot of people see that and they think, oh, you have to go to prison to get out of your head. And that's not really true. What you're talking about, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you're getting out and getting out of you by going into you. It really, yogi, yes, it is prison based. And that's where it started and the concept came from with you. But it's really about getting into you to get out of you so that you can have this feeling of belonging, of being heard, being seen, being understood. Is that correct?
100%. I've never been in
All right.
prison. I've never been a
Right.
prisoner, but I was a
Okay.
huge prisoner.
Of
So,
yourself.
yes, yes.
Yes.
Of my
Yes.
own life experience, of my own abandonment issues, of my own parental issues, my sibling issues, my financial issues, the husband leaving me issue, being a single mom issue, la. All these things built up a wall around me that caused chronic underlying depression and then just major depression. And it wasn't until I went into a prison and began the journey inside that I even realized that those walls were created by me. They were they were my walls. I created them and I could dismantle them. It took a while, but I could dismantle them, which I did. All of us are in a prison of one form or another. We just need to decide if we want out.
And people call you Coach Taylor. Um, what does that mean to you to be called coach by all these men and women that you've helped over the years?
It makes me cry.
It should. It's amazing to me. Um, did you choose to start calling yourself Coach Taylor, or did your students just start calling you that?
Well, let's go back to Terminal Island, sitting in those small circles.
Okay.
These circles kept getting bigger and
Yeah.
bigger and bigger. And the student said, well, what should we call you? Are you a teacher? No. Are you a preacher? No. Are you a counselor? No. Well, what are you? Well, we couldn't use our first names. I said, "Well, I am just a volunteer who thinks that you guys can do better than you're doing." Then one guy said, "Well, kind of like a coach." And I said, "Call me
Yeah.
Coach Taylor."
Great. When you reflect on where you were as a person when Gogi began and where you're at now, what has changed the most and what has not changed at all?
Wow. What has changed the most? Well, if I could go back to that woman, I would just hold her and tell her how wonderful she was. I would give her a hug and say, "You're heard and you're seen." And what's changed the most is I feel heard and I feel seen. What's changed the least is my insatiable appetite to provide a route to freedom for anyone, everyone, anyone can feel levels of freedom and creativity that they never knew was possible. And so I have an insatiable appetite, much like the very first, wow, you're telling me I could be boss of my brain. I got to share that. So,
Yeah.
so I have an insatiable appetite for sharing simple tools to help anybody create their own freedom.
Okay. Excellent. Um, Talking about you again, um, and I know I always get kind of uncomfortable when I have to talk about me. It's like, am I going to sound this way or that way, or people going to change their perception of me? What is one thing you wish people understand about the real Coach Taylor that they don't get?
Um, Life is not easy, but suffering is a choice. My life is not easy, but whether I choose to suffer is my choice. And I do not choose to suffer. I will not suffer. My life is not easy. The choices I've made has resulted in a lot of isolation, a lot of not relating to my own peers, isolation from family. The road I have chosen is one that I wouldn't want for others. Um, so it may look fun. It's not without its minute by minute challenges, and it's a lonely road.
All right. And what keeps you inspired when that road gets lonely, as you just mentioned? What keeps you inspired when it gets to feeling lonely there, when it feels heavy, or when it seems like it's moving too slow? What keeps you going? What gives you that bump to get out of bed in the morning?
Okay, I have a perfect story. I just finished an interview before we got on with
uh,
one of my students. He sent me an email and he said, I just want to thank you. I was released May 9th, 2024, and I am almost out of here. I want to thank you because you were instrumental in my freedom. And so I said, let's get on a Zoom call and let's film it. I had
yeah.
bet him he was 19 years to life, and he was 7 years in, and he was at Pleasant Valley State Prison. And I said to him, I bet you $100 you're out within 5 years. And he looked at me and said, what? How? I'm 19 to life. I said, I bet you $100 you're out within 5 years. So he called to lay claim on that bet. He wasn't out in 5 years. He was out in seven, but he was out. And
He was home.
he was home, but he said that my challenge to him, my believing in him was the only reason he began to change his life around. So it's stories like that that just keep my gas tank filled, keeps my engine
Yeah.
going, and it keeps the things that I choose not to suffer from, keeps them at bay. You hear a story like that, and of course you're going to get up to have another day of being of service.
Right. That's excellent. If somebody reading your story on the website, for example, feels lost, broken, unsure that life is worth living anymore for them, what is something you would say directly to them if they were sitting there in your space with you? What is
I,
that
w-
one thing you
I,
want them to
I
know?
would say within the next 10 minutes, let's find one thing positive you can do for someone else. Because the only reason we feel that we aren't worth things or life isn't worth living is if we are concerned about ourselves. If we immediately focused on, can I pick up that piece of trash? Can I do something? The second we get other focused, most of the momentum starts to fuel itself. It's a matter of building in the habit of other focused, not to deny ourselves our own things that we need. Certainly, I'm the first to get a cup of coffee for me. I make sure that I'm okay before I start giving to others. But even if I don't want to give to others, I focus on giving to others. And the second I get my mindset on who can I help? How can I help? Who can I help? How can I help? Then that moment of desperation is lessened. It doesn't have the power over you that it did.
Love that. Love that. I'm gonna kind of backtrack here. Um, Claiming responsibility, you said is of paramount importance to being successful with Gogi in general. I'm guessing is where we were headed with that. Um, why is that such a vital part of it about claiming responsibility?
Well, there's a difference between claiming responsibility and the Gogi Life tool claim responsibility. Claiming responsibility is most often associated with the past. Yeah, I broke into the liquor store. I stole the stuff. I claim responsibility for that. And that is shoved down the throat of people, even children. Like, you got to claim responsibility for this. Okay, I claim responsibility. As a Gogi Life tool is different. It's claim responsibility for who I am today. How I act and react today is what I'm using the tool claim responsibility for. So my actions and my reactions today are mine. So I'm no longer tethered to the past. I'm no longer tethered to an addiction. I'm no longer tethered to abandonment or depression or any or gangs or anything. My actions and my reactions are mine today. I claim responsibility for my actions and reactions. That puts me in control of everything that I am thinking and saying today. So irrespective of what went on yesterday or 2 minutes ago, I can claim responsibility for this moment forward. And that's the beauty of this tool.
All right. Um, so we're getting here towards the end of our time together today. Anyway, I hope there are many more of these conversations actually after today. They've got my mind going 100 different directions actually of other things that I can write about. Um, any final words from you for anybody who's reading this on your website when it goes on there?
People are in prison and they don't even know it. Freedom is available for everyone. Anybody who's stuck in any mindset, thought, relationship, there is freedom to be found there. And the Gogi Life tools are simple ways to start making that happen.
Perfect way to wrap this up. I love that. First, I want to thank you for participating in this today. I'm looking forward to getting this written for you. Um, yeah, I've learned a lot. It's been great finally meeting you.
I
Right?
know.
It's like, yay.
I'm so grateful. And
Yeah.
yes, I'm going to stop our recording, but yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.